And got everyone? Beautiful. Oh, this is. I think so. We should look at the library, but you know, that's in here. It's like, it's really, it's all kind of. But yeah, you're assuming going to one. Yeah. It's maybe a little bit less. Yeah, I guess it's going to take. Go with this. What's the word about it? You should try to be there way for be there for 7 years. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I have to get to 17, so I can set my 20 minutes more minutes. Right. So I get like 20 extra minutes. Right. Right. See, they take off. I show you, especially for you and me. Don't. Okay. So tomorrow, what time do you have to be here for the ACT? Yeah, 6. That's almost 4:38, right? Because you're here about 4:30, so you can get here early, get yourself psyched up. Sound good? Maybe sit outside here, have a breakfast, boil up some scones. It'd be wonderful. Think about it. Just think. All right. What time? All right. What time do you have to be? What time do you have to be here tomorrow? Seriously, what time do you have to be here? Be here. Don't be that idiot who comes home. If everyone stares at the letter sound. And technically, if you come in late in the middle of it, they're might have told everyone test out after we do it. Same thing. Don't bring your phone. Don't bring your iWatch or whatever it is. If those goes off, supposed to be validates. They're free buddies. Don't do that. Don't forget it happened. And I'm a rover. I'm pretty cool. Meaning wander around. And I hope all of you get to be in Ms. Humbert's class. I hear the temperature there, the after temperature right now. So the warmer it is, that percolates your brain. So it allows for thinking, kind of bubbles everything to the top. That's science. And I heard there was the mercury's vibration in school. So that'll have. That's fine. You can have mercury in school, just don't have a phone. All right, well, provided everyone an old age pension. Yeah, Social Security. What else did it provide? If you were laid off, what was that called? Unemployment. How is it paid for? Do you remember? What kind of tax is it? That's a different kind of tax. It is a regressive tax, but it's a certain kind of tax. That's the Wealth Tax Act. Look at what kind of tax it is. It's a tax. It's 6.2%. Say it again. Payroll. It's a payroll tax. So everybody's paycheck. So you have to work to be eligible for Social Security. I should have one thing I forgot about Social Security. There's a real problem that, especially for manual labor jobs, men pass away. 60s. If you got to 3, you usually live to your 60s or 70s, but they pass away and widows have nothing. It's only 20% of women can work. And so widows, or now widowers too, forgot the benefit. And one more thing I almost forgot. Social Security, if guys with their parents, the children get the benefits until they're 24. And this is huge. So that means if something happens, it happened to a good friend of mine. His father died. So remember that got him to college. Social Security benefits that he got. So that's all part of it. And then in the 1950s, they would have disability benefits as part of Social Security. They figure originally it was 20, they put it to 24 with the idea of being able to be old enough to where you're actually established. And they figure as a young adult, you weren't established. And what then happens in economic downturns when the biggest age is unemployment? Oh, yeah, if you're, so it's up to 25, if you're on. Say it again.
Like, all the next two different things. It's just series 24 and then all this.
Oh, that's totally different law. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And the reason it's for up to 25, that comes from the Affordable Care Act that was passed in 2010, and Social Security, that's from the passed act. It does really make sense. It should probably be on the same. But the idea being one is direct benefits, the other one is line of credit. But yeah, that really does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? It's one of the inconsistencies there. Yeah, in fact, I didn't even think about that. Thank you for mentioning that, because that is a really good point. That's important. What's going to happen in 2033? The haircut. Because the trust fund is going to run out because it's not taxing wealthy people. Really wealthy people don't pay the tax. There's so many really wealthy people that's led to that. Oh, we had the Wealth Tax Act. What would allow for labor unions? What law would allow for labor unions? Now, I forgot this. Please put down this for, put a little arrow, put a little asterisk. I forgot this for the Wagner Act. So put down sit-down strikes. When the Wagner Act would pass, we began a series of strikes, most famously in Flint, Michigan at General Motors. And it's called a sit-down strike because workers would literally sit down in a job and not allow production to go. This would be made, so put a little arrow up to the Wagner Act. I should have put this in the end of Wagner Act. For some reason, I moved it and forgot. So it's my fault. And they did it in the winter of 1936-37. There are kids out there supporting their fathers out, mostly men working there at that time. And it worked. General Motors recognized the United Auto Workers. Now, Ford, on the other hand, fought tooth and nail, using violence to try to stop labor unions, but eventually they too had to accept it. And with the success of the sit-down strikes, that led to a wave of strikes and worker victories. Huge wave. And that's what helped lead to more unionization. So, sorry I forgot that. But I had it in a different spot, and I don't know why. But this was all part of it. I should add in 1946, 1947, I'm sorry, sit-down strikes would be made illegal because they are so effective. So we got this. We got this, right? And didn't we get? Didn't get. We got this, right? We have these tax cuts, right? We got this for tax cuts. And I showed you this. So that's the way it is today. And we'll see where we're at. Montana used to have a lot of rates, but now it does only has 2 rates. Same deal, tax cuts for the very wealthy. And so let's get to the last of the second New Deal. And this is the biggest and most important of the New Deal programs, the WPA, at least in the short run. This program would be huge. I love that style of art. I'll show you again in 1 second. These are the counties that in just a year of existence for the WPA, every one of these counties in black had a WPA project. There were a number in Lewis and Clark County. The one that we probably know the best, if you ever go by Helena Middle School, because it used to be Helena High School, it was rebuilt after the earthquake as part of the WPA project. So the kind of the neat Art Deco front, which it does. I like the front of the Helena Middle School. That's WPA. This was an immense program. So we're going to watch a short video clip. It worked. Second period, but it gave me an ad. And I'm not sure how that happened, but I'm really annoyed by the ad. It was for tires. It was really cool. So let's hope the ad doesn't happen here. So let me tell you more about the subscription process. Okay. Now, this is important. So, get this down. The WPA had no discrimination, especially for race and technically on sex, even though it still happened. But this would be huge. Every other program, it was just practiced by the federal government going back for years, but especially Woodrow Wilson, to discriminate based upon race. Only white people got jobs, white men. And this ended this. And I should add, this would change the American political system or political structure through this day. Most blacks in the United States, in areas where they couldn't vote, remember the Jim Crow laws where they couldn't vote in the South? They voted Republican, about 60%. Why? The party of Lincoln. Even though the Republican Party wasn't a heck of a lot different on race than the Democratic Party before that. After this, it reversed. And blacks started voting overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party because of the WPA. So it didn't end Jim Crow laws, but would be a huge economic move for people who were not white and also for women in the United States. One more thing. In the 1960s, it would go to over 80% of African Americans would vote for the Democratic Party when the Republican Party came out against civil rights. And we'll get that in about 3 weeks. Jobs and infrastructure. And musicians, artists who are not being hired, like guys who wrote this song. Kind of an air horn. Airport. Yeah. So he's telling his wife, I'm not lying, I'm getting a job. I like the Art Deco WPA style. So I just want to give you a little video clip, but I just want to give you an idea how much it built. Over 1,000 dams. This is the biggest dam building program in history. This was a huge program. Many, including, there was a little landing strip in Helena. That's the airport would be started with this. So many roads, schools, arts, you name it. It was an immense program. And I love the WPA had hired artists to make make posters for different things, or for example, to write songs. It was a huge program. So many of the roads, all the federal highway system, almost all would be WPA. The interstate highway system would come in the 1950s, but it is very much a successor to the WPA. This would build the infrastructure that would build the United States after World War II, would be built by the WPA. Now, arguably, probably wasn't even quite big enough, but it was still huge. To give you an example of it, obviously you don't need to know every mile on this, just give an idea how vast it was. But I love the art of the WPA, including, have you seen those posters? Those national park posters are all WPA program. This was WPA hired artists, and I love it. These are my favorite national park posters, a whole series of them, WPA. And so many more. Every dot there is a WPA project. So every part of the United States was built by the WPA, and boy, you can really tell where the population was. And to a lesser degree, so much of California, which was just starting their boom, would be WPA. And yes, they'd have to rebuild it, even though it's kind of, some of it's being left behind. I should add, this wasn't the attitude of the United States for years after World War II. From the WPA, we can solve any problem. We can do it. We can make this. We can build things. And I don't see that anymore. So I don't know if we can regain that attitude. But that was the United States. What was the results? The second New Deal had immense results. Government spending went up, but look at industrial production. Then I'll explain this, and then really big, and then more. Or it's a very inefficient way of industrial production. But unemployment dropped dramatically. Unemployment dropped by over 50%. Now, so everyone put down unemployment drop. Got to restart. Fun with monopolies. Give me a sec. Unemployment shrunk. It was still too high, but it went down to 10%. But there was a feeling like the country was coming out of the depression, a feeling like the country was getting stronger. And the gross domestic product grew dramatically. We'll get to this little dip here. And the second New Deal, you could argue the whole New Deal, but the second New Deal would come up to one of the most important phenomenons in American history. One of the most important for the economy, for the attitude of the United States, for this economic boom of the 20th century called the Great Depression. For 45 years, and the only sustained time in American history, the gap between the rich and the poor shrunk. Actually, the incomes of the bottom grew faster than the incomes on top. That had never happened in the history of the United States before or since. There might be little glitches where the bottom might go higher for a year or two, like in 2021, but that's pretty rare. The middle class expanded, and people started thinking of themselves as a middle class society. We are a middle class country. More people, they had to work, but we could afford things that were unheard of for most people, like short vacation, maybe college education for the children, maybe without huge debt, maybe their own home. Little things like that. So you can say this saved capitalism, because what was coming out of this was going to be some kind of fascist monopoly state, or maybe socialism. Who knows? Now you make an argument for which might be better, but that's what he wanted, and this would be reversed. And you can see what happened. This graph right here is the income of the top 1%. And Gilded Age, the 20s. That's the Great Depression. In the Great Divergence, what we're in now. And now it is accelerated beyond comprehension. Wealth is focused to the top that at a rate that it's inconceivable now. It's just sucking money out. The amount of wealth that has gone from the bottom 90% to the top 1% is about $1.8 trillion since 2000. So it's a lot of money just going to the top. Now, you can make the argument that will encourage more production. You can also make the argument that's going to make for a lot of insecurity for the rest of the population. We'll see. This is a big deal. One more thing, as I mentioned this before, I was born in this. I have a different point of view than you do. My future was different. My future was this. The future is this. And now you can make the argument that change it. It's better now or worse now. But we definitely have a different point of view. And it's important to understand that you're going to have a different point of view than probably your parents or your grandparents. They should understand that too, though. Sometimes that could be a generation gap, so to speak. Moving on. This is the last thing I'll show you, and this is actually pretty stark. This is the income of the red is the top 1% income growth, the blue, bottom 90%. And look at the blue for the Great Compression, and look what it is now. Here's income growth, the top 1% now. Pretty startling. That's a similar graph. Just a different world. There's basically almost no income growth for the bottom 99%. So, 1936, Roosevelt's kind of riding a high. Even though there's intense conservative opposition, the vast majority of Americans look at him as ending the Depression. It was not over. And they probably hadn't done enough. Al Landon would be nominated by the Republicans. He was a moderate Democrat, and conservative Republicans were furious. And conservative Republicans would feel marginalized for the next 40 years. Now they control the Republican Party. That's a different story. We'll come up to that. FDR, of course, is going to be nominated. Landon did because he knew how popular the New Deal was. Oh, the New Deal is good, but we can do it better. That's what this cartoon tries to show. But most people didn't believe that. One thing, though, political polling was brand new. And one of the more popular magazines in the United States was a magazine called Literary Digest. And it did a poll of their readers that was picked almost every election before. And they polled their readers. And they found that Alf Landon was going to win 60% of the vote and be a landslide for the Republicans. And a few newspapers jumped the gun. Here's marching an army to defeat the destructive New Deal. And their assumption was this, but think about subscribers to a magazine during the Depression. Might that be a little skewed count? Might you be skipping a lot of people who might not be able to afford to subscribe to a magazine? And even though there was more money spent for the Republicans, FDR had built a coalition that would soon become the Democratic coalition until the 1970s. So a series of things happened, including a big hunk of Democratic ineptitude in the 70s. And who made it up? Union members, farmers. Hey, there are no farmers. That's 0.5% of the population now. And actually, the number of farms are dropping like a rock in the last 3 years. And there weren't very many before that. So there's almost no farmers today. Working class and small business, immigrants, and African Americans, because the WPA voted for Roosevelt. And most of those people couldn't afford literary digests. So this was the Roosevelt coalition. And you would see the Democrats. Well, to give you an idea how successful the Roosevelt coalition was, from 1930 until 1994, 1930 to 1994, only one time will Republicans control the U.S. House of Representatives. That's how dominant the Democratic coalition is. It would start blowing up in the 70s, and you see it finally blow up in the 90s for various reasons. So when the election actually happened, Roosevelt's in blue, it was a blowout. The biggest combination of popular vote, remember that doesn't matter, but also electoral college. Only two other presidents in American history had a higher popular vote victory than Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. And that's going to be Richard Nixon in 72, and then the biggest will be Lyndon Johnson in 1964. And what a sweep. But add this last thing to this. It was a Democratic sweep. Democrats took total control of the House and the Senate, and most state governments would be Democrats. But there's a heck of a lot of conservative Democrats who did not like the New Deal, but Roosevelt winning like this, they were scared to go up against them. And one more thing, just imagine how Roosevelt would feel after this. I'm unstoppable. I could do no wrong. Which, of course, that's hubris, which is a great word for it, will end the New Deal. By the way, biggest victory, Literary Digest, that's their top next. I should add, it ended Literary Digest. It destroyed it. The embarrassment by this, if you rolled it up to a really popular magazine called Reader's Digest, it's kind of amazing how fast it went away. Roosevelt's plan for a third New Deal would concentrate on some kind of national health care, probably an insurance, maybe like what Canada has now, or maybe something like Germany. It's not clear. Education, massive aid for education, also for something that was unheard of for colleges too. Ideally, some kind of system where public schools would have free or at least almost no tuition. Thank goodness we don't have that, huh? That's me being facetious. I will decon that. And then civil rights. But there's a problem. So you can see it right here. The Supreme Court. Roosevelt thought, I have to do something about the Supreme Court, which stopped the first AAA and the NRA. I mentioned that before. And in 1937, he proposed what's court packing. What's court packing? Well, there had not been a change in the Supreme Court membership since Reconstruction. The Congress creates court system. Congress can make 1 million members of the court if they want to, but they haven't done it. They've stuck with 9. They've got 7, 11, 9, etc. And what was happening was the conservative, economically, but also socially, Supreme Court had stopped 2 bills, and Roosevelt was really worried, will it stop Social Security? He was terrified by that. The 2 centerpieces of the New Deal wouldn't stop it, and the Great Compression. Didn't know about that. He proposed a system where appoint up to 6 judges, 1 for every judge over 70. It's kind of like an apprentice. It was a clever law that was too clever. And almost immediately it caused a firestorm. I see Congress being heated up as a lot of conservative Democrats said, no, we will go against this. And opposition, and this actually gave life to the Republican Party, which looked dead. Does Roosevelt want to be a dictator? This is an anti-court packing cartoon showing the 9 members, and then it shows the 6 new judges, and you notice they're all FDR, implying he'll appoint a rubber stamp court, which was always a problem, but Roosevelt was told this is not going to pass. Don't push it. Let it go away. Later on, maybe we'll get it, but it's not going to pass. Too many conservative Democrats. Roosevelt thought he was unstoppable, pushed it through Congress, and it failed. Southern Democrats joined with Republicans, and that would stop it. And the Democrats had a huge majority, but the Democrats were split. His own party voted against it. Now, why was it such a big deal? Roosevelt seemed unbeatable, and now he could lose. Ironically, the court did become more liberal. The Wagner Act and Social Security did pass. But it was a political defeat for FDR. So they were kind of cowed by this. And they approved the Social Security and the Wagner Act. But Southern Democrats realized he could lose. And now they could go against it. Not all Southern Democrats, but the conservative ones. And conservative Northern Democrats. It gave life to the Republican Party. There's Robert Wagner's celebrating it passed. I should add, at this moment, there is a court case winding its way up to the Supreme Court now to get rid of the Wagner, to make labor unions unconstitutional. And I think it has a very good chance of passing the very conservative Supreme Court. And that would make for a dramatic change in American society. We'll see. So, then Roosevelt made he made a couple other political mistakes, hubris. So what was happening was years of depression had led to increasing government deficit. And Roosevelt decided, depression's over. Let's pay down the debt. Let's balance the federal budget. The problem with balancing the federal budget is this. If a country's in debt deflation, it will decrease demand. he proposed, remember that term, austerity, and cutting the WPA, the biggest of all the programs in half. Ironically, Roosevelt joined the conservative Democrats and conservative Republicans to vote for this. The base of the Democratic Party, Roosevelt's base, didn't want this. So he went against it. A terrible political mistake, which Franklin Roosevelt never recovered from. He's already hurt by the failure of poor packing and now this. And what happened? Demand immediately tanked and a recession began. If you have an economic recession, you don't want it named after you. The Partridge disaster. No, I don't want that. The Roosevelt recession. Now, this is the dip in unemployment dropping, here it's going back up. Of disastrous failure. Now, Roosevelt learned his lesson. And the heck with the budget, you get the economy going and worry about later. Or as I so elegantly we're not going to put, deficit, schmeficit. You like that? Yeah, I made that up. Schmeficit. That's a word I made up for you. The heck with the deficit. And he's going to fully adopt liberal economics. We'll worry about the deficit in boom times. But in reality, do you really need to worry about it? What did he adopt? Keynesian economics. Oops. Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics. So what is Keynesian economics? Well, Keynesian economics is named after the economist John Maynard Keynes. He's a British economist, and he'd been writing about this for years. Revolutionary ideas, opposite of trickle-down economics. He even wrote Roosevelt a letter in 1937 saying, your desire to balance the budget is a disaster. It will not work. Why? He didn't call it this yet. It wasn't, they didn't have the name, but debt deflation. If debt deflation drops demand, no one's going to spend money and the country's still at debt deflation. So the government should use deficit spending. Borrow the money that's not being used to create demand, to make up the difference. Then you worry about the deficit when tax revenues are up in a boom. The Second New Deal did this partially, but not fully. In fact, only 2 countries completely adopted deficit spending to get out of the Depression, and both were remarkably successful. One, of course, is Sweden. You all think, right? And does anybody know, here they're building this really kind of elaborate highway system in other countries. Anyone know what country that is? It's called the Autobahn. Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany adopted deficit spending to keep themselves out of the Depression. Not weapons, roads, bridges, dams. All of a sudden, unemployment just ended in Germany. Then they'll start their rearmament. But that's another story. So, there's Hitler doing the building. He did it all himself. No, he's doing the politician thing. One shovel of dirt when they're making the Autobahn and leave. Hitler did not. Hitler rarely did anything. Except when he was not. He did not put in a hard work though. But he let others do. Here he is on the new Autobahn, which yes, the modern freeway interstate highway system copies the Autobahn. Maybe I'll tell you my story of driving on the Autobahn. It's fun. Moving on. So what is Keynesian economics? So we drew trickle-down economics. This one's different. It's going to start bottom up. So you need to make some room in the bottom going up. Remember, trickle down, money goes to the wealthy through government programs. They produce goods, supply, and that creates workers and demand. Here it's going to be the opposite. It's very basic, but it's good economic. This is a good economic background. Oh, by the way, here's him in Britain saying, this is back in 33, Mr. Keynes at the plant. And here he is looking like a diabolical villain from a 1940s movie. I just found that picture really funny. And he's like, grab that book and smile. So, starts with working class. Now I'm working class. I mean the vast majority of people in every country that have to work. In a modern capitalistic country, you need a wage, and therefore they have to work to get the necessities of life and any luxuries. So we're talking working people, middle class people. And the middle class was really small then. It would grow. I told you about the Great Depression. It's shrinking now. But government aid. I'll show you the government aid in a second, but that puts money in their hands. You like all the dollar signs? Isn't that cool? If you give people money who didn't have money, what's the first thing they're going to do with it? They will spend it right away. That will increase demand. That increases demand right away. And I forgot a word. Why I didn't put this in. Give me 1 second. How did I do this? Forget it. Yeah, it's not, but opposite. I mean, they're all different forms of capitalism, but yeah, it's the opposite form. It's the liberal form. I meant to kick that. So I couldn't get, and now I remember why I couldn't do this. So just go with me on this. That puts demand. And once that happens, companies begin to realize, hey, we need to produce more. Now we can produce more. Now people are buying stuff. So production goes up. I forgot to put the keyword, put down supply. Put down supply. So production up, supply. So I add the word supply. And what happens then eventually companies need to hire more workers, don't they? So employment goes up. And that puts more money in whose hands? Right back to you. And that is the engine of Keynesian economics. So conservative economics, the engine, you put money in the hands of the very wealthy, they will produce goods. That means you'll hire workers. Supply creates demand. Here, demand creates supply. So demand. So that is the essence of it. Or that's why it's called demand, liberal or demand side. And for some reason, I'll write demand side twice. Just go with it. So it's liberal or demand side. So it starts with the populace. So this is a different vision of a capitalistic society, but it's capitalist, even though I should add, conservatives will call this communist or socialist, which is kind of hilarious, calling FDR a communist, considering how much the communists hated him. And help consumers. So don't help the suppliers of goods, help consumers. Help average people, and that will increase demand. That is Keynesian economics, Keynes. So what does that mean? So let's get to the government aid. This should be pretty basic because we kind of did it in reverse with conservative economics. So let's do that. Oh, I almost forgot one thing. So what they want is a big middle class. If you have a big middle class, AKA the Great Compression, you have more people with money to spend, but more importantly, you have people who feel vested in the system. The country is helping them, the system is helping them, and they will defend the system. So as Roosevelt saw this, Keynesian economics, and so did Keynes, this will be a defense against fascism and socialism. This will be a defense. If you get rid of the middle class where they feel insecure, that's when you get fascism. That's what they really say in the 30s. And every country that did Keynesian economics had a Great Compression. So most of the Western world did Keynesian economics after World War II. You saw Great Depression all across Western Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada, etc. Even Luxembourg. And you can all see where they started going away from Keynesian economics. The Great Depression ended, like Britain. But you go to like Germany, it's still there. Germany, it's just different. Still the Germans, so be prepared for that. But it's a lot different. And Luxembourg, they speak a language no one understands. Moving on. So what is the government aid? Let's get to the government aid. This should be pretty basic. So remember, trigonometric economics, get wages low. Keep wages low here, get wages up. With the idea, sure, this might dip into cost, but this will lead to demand and selling more in the long run, more money. So progressive taxes, like the wealth tax. Got that? This should be pretty basic. Pro-union, like the Wagner Act. Government regulation. One of the biggies would be like finance. The big one, Glass-Steagall. Remember that one I told you about that would regulate the banking industry, create the FDIC. They get rid of it in 1999. Product will crash 9 years later. And still in that boat. Antitrust. Anti-monopoly. Safety net. So remember I told you about the safety net with government programs. So for example, unemployment insurance is probably the most important. If times of high layoffs, this is a cushion. Aid for the poor. ERA was a tiny little direct aid program, direct money. Another one that would happen as part of the second AAA would be food stamps. Today we call this SNAP. It's a tiny little benefit, only about $140 a month per person. But it's a tiny little cushion. The US doesn't have a lot of this. This is more if you go to France. Social Security is a big one. Public works. Bad times, you build stuff. So an element of this 2023 with to build 2022 to build microchips and other infrastructure. That's all gone away. WBA is the biggest example of that. And then two more that didn't really happen here. Health insurance. Health insurance did not happen. It's only partial, and that's for the elderly. We'll get to that. It's called Medicare, and that's still pretty limited. And the other big one that did not happen here very much, education. There was a partial bit of this in the 60s during Lyndon Johnson administration, very partial. And we're conservative today, so colleges are being but they being cut. So that means higher tuition. That's the idea. So that's Keynes. So you can have elements of both. And there could be elements of some supply side built into this. But let's get to one more thing though. What are the challenges? So like supply side, I had the challenge of oversupply and also speculation. This has some big challenges too. First off, if everyone's demanding goods, there's going to be inflation. There will be inflation. But it's built into the system. The Federal Reserve can raise interest rates. I've already told you about this once before. Or the US government can raise taxes. That pulls excess money out in good times and also pays back the debt. The problem is no politician likes to raise income taxes, and the Federal Reserve sometimes won't do enough. The one you were born into. The debt will go up if you do deficit spending. But in boom times, government spending drops. You don't need as many programs, and tax revenues go up. So after World War II, the US government deficit, the debt, massive. But by the end of the 1970s, the debt was almost gone as a percentage of the gross domestic product. There's still debt, but it's so small. Why? Years of economic. A debt's not bad. Debt's not bad. But if you don't have an effective way to pay it back, it can really affect inflation and interest rates. And we might be in that now because 40% of the US government debt that's been created last 6 years. It doesn't mean it's bad, but you have to be able to show that you can collect taxes. Government power, the president's going to have a lot of power. But what Keynes said, you have a democracy. And the democracy control. But remember, even in the 1940s, a significant number of Americans could vote. And there's always threats to democracy. While threatening or making it very difficult to vote. And there's a law in Congress that basically says you have to show a birth certificate or a passport to vote. And it might pass. Your driver's license won't work. And if you change your name like you got married, you couldn't vote. That's right now in Congress. President Trump really wants that to pass. Then you can say that's a make for safer elections. Certainly like drop voting totals down. So conservatives will hate things. It's called the SAVE Act. Yeah. Exciting times. You know, we're ready to end civilization. It's just walking in. So we're exciting times. President said that a few days ago. Yesterday. All right. So, in the late 70s, what happened was the late 1970s, there would be an economic disaster worldwide, and that would end Keynesian economics, and that got conservatives a toehold in the art of state control. I should add one more thing very quickly. Anybody know what caused the economic disaster of the 1970s? It was a 5-month oil embargo. I see no connection to today. Nothing to see here. Okay, it's only been 5 weeks of an oil embargo. Right now, we're 20% oil has been shut off. There's nothing to fear. That only caused an 8-year economic disaster in 1974. Everybody, the AP exam is a month away. This is now when we start review for the AP exam. You have a review package. You don't have to do the whole thing, you have to do part of it, but then to get a full A, I reward you immensely for this. And I will help you. I will take time out of my own time to help you with this. I've been doing this for years. It's a review packet. So we got to do some notes and go back and review. I will help you on top with this. So if you're not taking the AP exam, only have to do the ones in bold. If you are taking the AP exam, you have to do the ones in bold to get a 79%. Then you have to do most of the others to get an A. Sound good? It's worth 2 test scores. I reward you immensely for studying for the exam. Immensely. And I've done review sessions, a couple review sessions at night, and I will take intervention time and answer any questions you have. So let me explain this very quickly. I hope, pass it sideways. I hope this will be a review. So the next one, just pass it sideways, we'll get it there. So I'm just giving 4 to this one. All right, have a look at this really quick. See the bold ones? Wait. Everybody. If you're taking the exam, you have to be through page 6. Through page 6. And everybody has to go last page. The other ones, to get an A, you have to fill all parts of it. And let's get start running out of time. Class might just be doing this laughable bit to get the last little bit. Okay? I will reward you immensely. I know it's work, but trust me, it helps so much. Also know that it's easy for you. So but it really does help. Thank you. Oh, sure.
Something else.
I mean, I can't. Well, sure. That one there. Should be there. Just. Should really want more about the. We don't need.
Well, I don't.
Good enough to be a little bit.
It's a pleasure being. It's terrible sometimes. So I think it's a So, I'm being ready. I was just gonna do that.
Your assignment, Thomas? Yeah.
And really, some professional, I'm going to make